Hello, Divine Goddess. Welcome on my podcast, Chloe Tremor Therapy Podcast. The podcast where you find all you need to know about your spiritual and emotional healing path as the divine feminine you are, the divine goddess you are. I am Chloe Tremor. I am a holistic therapist, trauma release expert with 10 plus years behind me of experiences and studies. I went myself through my spiritual awakening and Kundalini awakening that was fucking wild. I'm so grateful for it. And since then, I've been on my healing journey, rising as the goddess I am. I am today in union with my twin flame as well. And I am a mom of one. I desire for you to rise with me. So enjoy this podcast and enjoy this episode. Sending you much love. Hello, Divine Goddess. Welcome on this episode on Chloe Tremor Therapy Podcast. I am happy to have you here. And today's topic is going to be about sexual abuse. And I'm going to be talking about all the different ranges and types of sexual abuse on a spectrum, and going from childhood sexual abuse and adult sexual abuse, and also sharing with you a little bit about my own story and how I overcame also trauma from sexual abuse as a child and as an adult. So just wanted to also have, warn you, this might be triggering. So if this introduction is already, stirring things up and making you dissociate or feel really unwell, you don't have to listen to it. So really listen to your body on this. But I will be talking, you know, uh, going straight to the point and, um, without any filters, just to warn you. So sexual abuse is, any forced sexual activity, that, is forced by a perpetrator, obviously. And forcing can be in different forms, from manipulation, uh, coercing someone through manipulation, blackmailing, threatening, um, to full-blown sexual assault, and also any sexual activity when it comes to children, any, manipulation or any sexual activity that an adult does with a child is sexual abuse. There's no need to even go deeper in that subject. Like, when it comes to children, they don't have any, they're under adults of obviously supervision and protection. So any adult that tries to have any sexual intercourse or a sexual activity with a child is abusing them, okay? Even if there's no blackmail or manipulation. And obviously there is, because, the usually perpetrators which with children will pretend it's a game. So there's definitely manipulation in it. But because children really trust adults, they might be, there are easier targets when it comes to that, because they don't have any, they're small and they're vulnerable. So that's for the definition. On my own journey, I was abused sexually by one of my parents. And this is something that I had actually forgotten. And that's a trauma that was reactivated when I had my daughter and became a mother. And through my birth, it got reactivated, and I had completely, um, I had traumatic amnesia. So I had completely forgotten. My subconscious had blocked it out. And so it's really through my birth and becoming a mother that it got reactivated, especially with my daughter, in the way that I started having paranoia, being afraid that people were gonna kidnap her, and being just so paranoid that someone might touch her or sexually abuse her, you know, like kind of becoming obsessed with those thoughts and having intrusive thoughts and um a lot you know, around that subject. And so that's when I realized that something was off. And then also there was one day where I was just going, you know, having a just having some time out with my husband and my daughter, and I smelled something, and it just unblocked something in my subconscious, and I started remembering a certain feelings of disgust of my body. And this feeling was familiar because it was a smell of wheels and you know, the fabric of wheels. And that smell reminded me of a garage, and so it reactivated memories. And I had to really dig deep in my subconscious to actually remember it, because I couldn't even remember it and have images. And it slowly started returning to me, but just wasn't able to identify who it was and able to identify, you know, what was happening and exactly what I had been through. So I seeked out different types of help to help me uncover this, until, you know, um, until I was able to remember the trauma. Although denial is a very also is a something that we face, especially when we're children, you know, when you're faced with such horrible experience. You know, most of the time, to protect yourself, your subconscious is going to just block it out so that you can survive in a toxic environment. Honestly, I was very lucky because I think it just happened once and it wasn't something on a regular basis, which, you know, I was able to exchange with people who had sexual abuse on a regular basis. And that when it's on a regular basis, it scars you so much more as well. Obviously, the more you experience a traumatic experience and you experience something horrible like that on a regular basis, the more damage it causes, you know, a human being, obviously, and a child. So I think that for me, because it happened just once, um, obviously, like you know, the sexual violation and the sexual assault was, you know, there was all the context before and the violation started with just looks and the way the unsafety that I felt with that parent. And so obviously, you know, that also caused trauma in me, like just the feeling of being unsafe and feeling I had a predator just watching, you know, and um watching me in a weird way, you know? And as a child, you know, you don't, when someone sexualize you, you don't understand. It just feels weird and, you know, maybe off, but you don't know what it means. But you just feel uncomfortable. At least for me, I just felt uncomfortable. So, because it happened once and to protect myself, I erased that experience through my memory and subconsciously. And I just went on with my life and having this relationship with that parent as if it had never happened. And to also protect, you know, my innocence and being able to have a relationship I so desperately wanted with that parent. And obviously we all want a mother and a father, or, you know, a relationship with our, you know, our mother and father. And it's when the relationship is toxic and the parent is toxic, um we we are, you know, we're ready to erase all the negative. We usually erase all the negative stuff so that we can be, um you know, just keep the good stuff. to protect ourselves because it's horrible. And also that parents, I remember, also physically, abused me, like with punishments. And that also I had erased in my memory. Um, Also because it didn't last too long, but obviously I was physically abused into submission. And so because I was scared, I became a good girl. I became very obedient, and I think a lot of people can relate to that. Um, and and so when you're punished into obedience, when the purpose is obedience, obviously, and not, submission, and uh, and not too much of like torture, then it doesn't necessarily last. And so you're just, abused into submission and obedience. So that was my case. And so the way that sexual abuse affected me is that I wasn't able to connect with pleasure. Like, it disconnected me from my body. It disconnected me from pleasure. I wasn't able to feel anything. I wasn't able to feel pleasure in bed. I spent, a decade pretending to have pleasure in bed with guys. And also putting me in a place where um I where I developed also at one point hypersexuality and sex addiction due to that. And it was later on that I understood how it was linked, interconnected as well. I also experienced sexual abuse in an abusive relationship. Unfortunately, a lot of toxic relationship at one point, become sexually abusive, sexual harassment, and just being degraded and being humiliated and being manipulated into sex and then humiliated because criticized for my way of being in bed and just humiliated. And also humiliated through, sexual harassment and, you know, so all that type of sexual abuse. And that was also, that is also very difficult, especially when you obviously, when you're with a predator and you're in a toxic relationship at first, the person is always, of course, perfect and just pretends to be someone else. And then when they show their real face, because it's so hard to let go of the illusion and the persona they made you believe, trick you to believe they were. And so because usually it's like such a love bombing, and usually we are so rare to receive, like, most of human beings on this earth never received that amount of love. And I think even my daughter, although I'm very conscious and I love her and I adore her, not even my daughter, who has a mother who loves her and a father who loves her, um, will feel that amount of perfect love, because obviously, like, we're all human beings and no one is perfect. So even someone who is like in a healthy environment will never be loved the way a narcissist, or, a narcissist loves bomb someone. So it's like so unrealistic as well. So that's why it's so easy to fall in that trap. And so because when the person showed their real colors, it's very hard to let go, of who we thought. And it's like you have to grieve this person to be able to see them as they truly are. And so that's also a process. But by the time you realize you have to grieve them and they're not going to change, obviously the abuse happened, and in our mind, it's like, oh, he's not aware that he's abusive, or, maybe, he's taking it out on me, but it's because he's suffering. And so we make up all those excuses for the behavior of the person, um, although we're being sexually humiliated and abused, emotionally abused. for some of us, unfortunately, physically abused, and we make up all those stories in our mind. And sometimes by the time we realize that we need to grieve the persona they created for us, it's too late for for some of us, and it gets to death, unfortunately. Most of domestic violence killing happen usually with women, but there's also men, obviously, and in all communities, LGBTQ plus. So it happens for everyone. So it's not just because you're a woman, it can happen to guys too. There's also abusive relationships in all types of communities. So yeah, it's a very hard also, I think, for me in a like in an abusive relationship. It took me a long time to recognize that I had been a victim of sexual abuse, that I was manipulated, that I had the silent treatment, that I was just manipulated into having sex, and it just became a complete humiliation, and over again, and so it was crushing me over and over again. And just realizing that I actually didn't want, I didn't want to. And when I would say no, I don't want to, um, like, uh, my ex would do everything to guilt trip me, threaten me, and just, um, use all sorts of tactics to get me, to have sex with him, like, where that's what couples do, like as if I owed him something. And just, yeah, like just abusing me emotionally until I would crack and accept, because I just didn't have any willpower anymore, and I was just exhausted. And then it would be humiliation, laughing, mocking, and criticizing my way of being in bed, And so that's even worse. Like that's like adds up to like emotionally abusive with sexual abuse. And then just the harassment, like touching me inappropriately when obviously I didn't want to, and it was so disrespectful. And and yeah, I think that for a long time for me, I couldn't see it. Like it took me really a lot of therapy and counseling to realize that that was sexual abuse, and that it wasn't okay. And yeah, and that also left scars um in me that I had to heal. But I feel like the most difficult for me was to make peace with the sexual abuse I had experienced when I was a child, especially, you know, ha especially because I was in an environment where my reality was already questioned, my sanity, because everyone else was toxic too, so like emotionally abusive. So because I was always made to question my reality when I was sexually abused, I questioned myself even. I questioned without the help of anyone. I was already conditioned to question my reality. So I went straight into denial and straight into, you know, I'm, I'm the one who has issues. If I'm self-harming, if I have dark thoughts, and if my mental health is bad, it's just because there's something wrong with me, just deeply wrong with me. But obviously, sexual abuse, especially, I mean, when you're a child, it has so much impact, obviously, even when you're adult. But for me, my sexual assault when I was a child created so much damage, obviously, in my self-esteem, and just carrying this pain I couldn't put any word on, and feeling I was broken, feeling I was disgusting, having this complete rejection of my body, naked body, developing an eating disorder, wanting to be very small and not take up too much space, being triggered, when I would be sexualized by men, although, it's not, being sexualized by men, can be is disrespectful, but in the streets, when men just look at you, those who are very not well educated, but like a lot of situation would trigger me, and I would just end up in tears and wanting to run back at my apartment or home and just feeling like I didn't want to go outside because there were all just predators out there just out to get me and just being just constantly in fear. I hid that very well for many years. Nobody around me knew what I was, dealing with. And so, I was very good at pretending, but I was suffered with so much anxiety and just to go outside, and just so many later on, so many things that were so triggering to me, and just feeling like the world was out to get me and somebody will end up succeeding in hurting me. It also like created a lot of like, yeah, mental health issues, self-harming, self-rejection, like all of that. And also dangerous sexual behaviors, sexual addiction, sex addiction, so hypersexuality, and that is a complex also. I'm not gonna, speak too long about this because that's very complex. It's a very complex, um, you know, uh, cognitive response from the brain to trauma and to sexual trauma specifically. But basically, an addiction that I developed later on because of that, and just having an eating disorder, body dysmorphia, and just hating myself so much. And I remember a lot of, people along my journey asked me like, what is it that you hate your body so much? And I couldn't put any words on that. It was just that this pain in me that I couldn't even explain and understand myself. And so I think the moment I was able to process that, it really liberated me from so much fear also of speaking my truth, of speaking up, of taking up space in the world and sharing my message and being myself and having the life that I desire and making this decisions for my needs and desires and for myself. And it's crazy how that type of trauma can really isolate you and just keep you small. So the most difficult part for me was to actually come to terms with the sexual abuse I experienced when I was a child because, I was carrying so much shame for usually when you carry so much shame, misplaced shame, as if it's your fault. And it's so true. Um, I just felt like if I spoke, I felt so ashamed to speak up. When I started sharing that with my close circle, I felt so much shame and I was just so, yeah, so scared of speaking up, so, you know, torn between a voice inside of me that was just questioning my reality, the denial, and the truth I knew deep down was true and it happened. And I think that this is an important process when we process sexual abuse is it's a process to overcome the fear to speak up, because I was just feeling like oh my god, like I'm what if I was a liar and I was just making up all the story in my mind and just making them up, like then I would be so crazy. Like I was just thinking, how can I say that if it's untrue? And if it's untrue, like I must be quite crazy to invent so horrible things, especially, it's also uh regarding to one of my parents and not wanting to tarnish their reputation. And if I'm saying that out loud, it has to be true because otherwise I'm messing with people's life. And I think it's so serious, sexual abuse is so serious that then when we talk about it, it has an impact. And I think I was so scared of speaking up because I thought, okay, like, first of all, I was scared, obviously. And secondly, it was so scary to speak up about it because obviously, um, it's your parents and there's consequences and there's going to be consequences and there has to be consequences. But in the moment, as a child, you're scared because you feel like you're going to break your family apart or you're going to hurt. And that's the weird thing and I think the most difficult thing for sexual trauma survivors is that, and I want to say sexual abuse survivors, is that you feel like speaking up is going to kind of break your family, break people, and have like such a huge impact on your family. And it feels so overwhelming to make that decision. And especially when you're alone, you don't have any adults to protect you. So, you know, most kids who are going through that, they're not going to speak up because they're too scared. And it makes sense. And I also have spoke with, sexual abuse survivors, and some of them also, for those who spoke up, some of them ended up having to continuously, have a relationship with their perpetrator and their abuser. Um, just because usually in terms of when it's with a family member that abused a child, there's a lot of situations where the child is obligated to still see their abuser, and it happens a lot too. And I know that a trauma survivor, a sexual abuse survivor that I spoke to, childhood sexual abuse survivor, she told me like um how unreal it is when you speak up and then nothing changes. Is the worst part. Um, being validated is one thing, but then sometimes in the family, it just happened also to the mother, to the grandmother. And it's like, it's those things happen, but it's still like your family. And there's so much like blindfolds on many people who don't want to see the issue and don't report sexual abuse, child sexual abuse, so child abuse in that way. And so sometimes it's so messed up. But I know that for me, I just felt like, yeah, what I wanted to say too was like I felt comp like the Stockholm syndrome. I felt responsible for my perpetrator, and I thought I don't want to mess his life up. I don't want to tarnish his reputation, and I don't want to like because you take on like that shame, and that's what is unfair. And that's what keeps a lot of people, muted and in silence, and and push people to not and prevent people from speaking up. So I really wanted to share this with you today, just to say that if you're struggling with, you know, mental health issues due to sexual abuse that you still have to digest, or maybe you don't know if you had sexual abuse, but you're kind of questioning it due to your behavior. One of the things I want to say that can help, first of all, validate your feelings and validate your experience, something that really helped me was to notice also the signs of trauma, of sexual trauma. There's different types of signs: hypersexuality or hyposexuality, like no sexuality at all. You have many also like symptoms of that type of trauma that you can find also online if you make some research. I also created a post on my blog on sexual abuse and the complexity of it and how it affects a human being. So feel free to check out my website and my blog to learn about the different symptoms you can have if you faced and experienced sexual abuse. So validating, if there's signs that just don't, you know, um, they just speak out loud, they just are so obvious and so potent. One of them is, being triggered by any topic on rape, on sexual abuse, like you get triggered when those things come up. I know that for me, I remember uh someone sharing with me they had been through sexual abuse. At that time I wasn't aware, like I was still unconscious of it. And I remember starting going into this hypermania and started drinking and just completely out of control emotionally and dysregulated. So if you have like symptoms like that, and being triggered when someone is talking about sexual abuse, and you're just feeling like you go into a free state and you're afraid and a deep anxious state, those are the types of sign that can indicate. Again, I'm not a doctor, and if you are struggling with your mental health, make sure to check with your doctor and local psychiatrist to get the proper, diagnosis and treatment, obviously. But something that can help, validate your feelings and also push you maybe to go and be and have therapy and do the right things for you is those types of signs. Also, depending, like, how's your sexuality? You see it often in in sexuality. So do you have sex addiction? Do you have hypersexual, like a sex drive? But also you don't really seek pleasure. It's like a physical urge. It's not actually a desire. And it's something that you need emotionally to feel stable. Do you have also dangerous sexual behaviors, like unprotected sex? That's one of the most common signs of sexual abuse survivors. It's like a self-destructive pattern that is often created in the subconscious where we, actually it's a form of um desperation call for help unconsciously, by putting ourselves in a dangerous situation. You maybe developed, borderline personality disorder, bipolar disorder. Those also mental health. We can find them with in sexual abuse survivors. But again, make sure to get the proper diagnose with a doctor to be sure. Don't self-diagnose, make sure to have the proper diagnose, to know what treatment can work for you. Because if, for instance, if you have uh, bipolar one, medication can really help you. Again, you decide what's best for you, and I'm not promoting necessarily medication, but it's a very, some mental health disorder are very serious and can be, put ourselves in harm's way and others. So it's important to get diagnosed if you feel completely out of control. Because honestly, one of the things that was difficult for me was sex addiction because I felt completely at one point out of control. And I was watching myself, putting myself in dangerous situation, just having sex with random people and just putting myself in a situation where I could have easily get raped, more than once, and no one would have noticed. No one would have known where I was, so no one would have been able to help me. And so it's like willingly seeking that trauma again. And so, I know how it feels like to be out of control and like knowing you should do better, but knowing you're putting yourself in harm's way, and at the same time just not being able to control yourself and be completely out of control. So if you're able to manage that, like I know for me, I was able like to to start my healing journey. I met a healer who helped me. Like I went through a Kundalini awakening shortly after that period of my life, and I made a conscious decision, to stop. But I think if I hadn't started my healing journey, I would have fell back into the addiction, obviously. So it's like Um, if you keep falling back into an addiction, it's important to get help. If you're able to embark on a healing journey and you can see the difference in your behavior, then that's good. Then it's good. But make sure you get the proper support. So yeah. So those are like there's many signs in that way. Your relationship, watching your relationship to your body, feeling like a deep sense of brokenness of something is wrong, but also having more specifically about your body dysmorphia also can be a symptom, like feeling that some parts of your body are just wrong and that they should be changed, and just having a rejection of also your genitals, feeling like they're disgusting, like not having a complete disconnection with your genitals and feeling like it's something like not liking like people going down on you and giving you pleasure, like feeling completely not being able to receive pleasure and feeling really triggered when you're having sex, obviously. So one of the things is also when you're having sex, being triggered, maybe pushing your partner away and falling back into that memory, suffering also from PTSD or CPTSD, like reliving the trauma when you're like having sex, for instance. Feeling like disgust, even if you're loving someone, like feeling this disgust for your partner and just for pleasure in general, for connection. Having a hard time with intimacy and creating connection with a partner in bed and just preferring having like mechanical sex, which feels safer than actually intimate sex and connected sex with someone. So not being able to make love without being triggered, without starting to cry, and that types of behavior. So those are the signs also that you might have experienced sexual abuse. But again, make sure to get diagnosed or go in therapy. Um, have the proper care, and reach out to a professional to help you navigate that, obviously. Um, And so, yeah, I think that's globally all that I have in mind. And so yeah, and then validating your feelings, and then also to heal from it, we have to process the shame, we have to process the fear, we have to process the hopelessness, we have to process the disgust. Sometimes you can even feel like just talking about it feels sick in your stomach. And so that also can be really therapeutic work is really helpful. Like trauma-oriented therapies are very helpful. So what I like to use with my clients is certain somatic movements and techniques, and then hypnotherapy, which helps to shut down, like to focus on the subconscious mind. And so certain, approaches help also to work with the trauma and to help, you deal with the trauma without dissociating. And so that's also something that can be also a symptom, dissociation. Pain, depression, clinical depression, suicidal thoughts, all of those also are symptoms. And so sometimes even treating, trauma can require some level of patience, first of all, and also certain modalities and specific ones to help you navigate it in a soft way and in a respectful manner of your body and your nervous system. So there's there's just solutions here. And what I like to help my client with is also like I also support my clients through healing sexual abuse as well. Uh, Again, I'm an accredited psychotherapist, complementary ther therapist practitioner, sorry. And also a Reiki master healer and an energy healer, which also helps in terms of soothing the nervous system. I like to use both and combine both. So if you'd like to start also your journey to healing, your own traumas and sexual abuse trauma. I have an application form that you just can fill. I've put the link in the description, and you can apply to work with me. I have different packages depending on your budget. And yeah, we can start from there. If you are more of the autonomous, you feel like you can manage it and you don't need too much guidance, but more of like tools. I also created an online course called Abidentia, the Ultimate Self-Healing Master Training, in which I share with you all the tools I share with my clients that you can use on yourself alone and do on your own to process internalized emotions and trauma, and process also your day-to-day emotions, which a lot of us, let's be honest, haven't been taught, generations before by our parents, because a lot of emotions, were dismissed. And so we didn't learn how to self-regulate. So if you also want to learn how to self-regulate, this course is definitely for you, all the way to healing your own traumas. So you have both options. Either you can work with me one-on-one, or you can also do it autonomously if you feel like you're in a place where you can handle it by yourself. You don't feel too much overwhelmed. Um, and the specific trauma, you feel like you can manage it. But if you're like seeing a lot of symptoms and you feel overwhelmed, check out my link to apply to work with me and see how we can start this journey together into helping you heal and overcome this. Okay. In the meantime, I'm sending you much love, and I'm so glad to. I hope this episode helped you, goddess. And remember, you're powerful, you are amazing, and you're so resourceful, more than you can imagine. So keep rising and keep shining, goddess. Sending you much love. Mwah.